stands now with third-party candidacy, it's very, very difficult for us to get on any ballots, small, middle, or large. And he shot right to the top for the U.S. Federal Senate. So that's great. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hey, David. Thank you for having me with you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Absolutely. This is great. We have a lot to discuss and a short time to discuss it. So why don't you go ahead and start off by telling people, usually people that are Green Party members, I like to know, like, just kind of how you got involved in the Green Party in the first place, and then we can go from there. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, that works. So I joined the Green Party officially 2 years ago when I registered as a Green in North Carolina and joined as a dues-paying member with the North Carolina Green Party. So that was about 29 months ago. First political party I ever joined. First time I ever affiliated with a political party in my life. I had just come to see. I had been voting third party for a while. But I just come to see that if I really believe that the two-party system is corrupt and undemocratic, and that it is one of the very things that is causing so many of our problems, then I need to do something to fix that, to work on that. Then I have to be involved in something where people are actively trying to make things better. So I joined the Green Party here, I had worked with Green Party members for quite a while. I've been involved in activism, particularly anti-war work, for the last almost 13 years now. And so my paths I crossed with various Green Party folks plenty of times over those years. And so I had an affinity for the Green Party, but it wasn't until 2020 that I actually joined. And again, my first time joining a political party, and this campaign for U.S. Senate is my first time as a political candidate.
That's great. So if I'm doing the math right, and I'm not really good at math on the top of my head, but I think I joined around the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, it was right after the election. I think a day or two after the election. Yeah. So that's right.
Yeah, I joined spring of 2020.
Okay.
So I did some stuff for the 2020 election. Went out, put out signs, hung door flyers, that kind of stuff. And then we lost our certification as a party after the 2020 election. So we had gotten on, was certified as a party in 2018, and we lost it in 2020. And now just this past month, we regained it.
Okay. All right. So I want to talk about third-party difficulties as far as candidacy goes and campaigning. And it's all due to the way that the system is established right now. It is solely designed for a two-party system because the two parties control it, and there's no other reason for it. That's it.
Right.
Real quick, I just want to say this, and I'll let you take the mic, is that they estimate about 25% of the voting population in America does not identify with either two of the major parties. That's a big chunk of people. And that that party suppression, which happens all the time, and we'll get to that in a moment, is voter suppression. And voter suppression is oppression. 100%. Right. Okay, go ahead. So why don't you talk about some of the difficulties that you personally have faced being a third-party candidate, and maybe more generally, if you know about that.
Sure. We in North Carolina, unaffiliated voters or independent voters are the biggest block in terms of who's registered. So 35% of North Carolinian registered voters are unaffiliated voters, and that's larger than both the Democrats and the Republicans. In terms of support for third parties, a new poll came out this week by Pew, and just this past week, like literally a week ago, that found that 70% of Americans either fully support or somewhat support the need for third parties. So the idea is something that it's at a historical high. There has been, particularly over the last 20, 30 years, an increased desire for third parties by the American voting public. But certainly that oppression, that suppression, that obstruction is one of the things that the two major parties do in order to keep themselves in power. And it depends upon which state you're at, which municipality you're in, as to whether it's the Democrats doing the suppressing or the Republicans doing the suppressing, but it's the same regardless of which party is doing it. There's not one that has clean hands. Here in our case, we needed, as I said before, we had lost our certification as a party back in 2020 after 2020 elections. So we need to get back onto the ballot, need to be recognized again as a political party. So in order to do that, we had a petition. We had to collect signatures. We had to collect almost 14,000 signatures. We collected 22,500 signatures. Of that, almost 16,000 were verified by the county boards of elections. And when we went to be certified by the state board of elections, even though we had almost 2,100 more signatures than was necessary, we were denied. And it was simply a case, a partisan decision. The state board of elections is run by a board of 5 members, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. It's Democrats of a majority because the governor is a Democrat. We ran into that obstruction. We were denied certification in June as a party simply because of questions about our petitioning process. Simply because they pointed at some irregularities in the signatures that have been invalidated by the county boards of elections. And if people aren't familiar with how the petitioning process works, there's always signatures that are not going to count, just the way it is. You know, nationally, across every state, about 70, 75% of signatures are counted. And, you know, so 1 out of 4 is usually thrown out for a variety of different reasons, almost never anything nefarious. Just someone wrote their address down wrong, or they thought they're registered, they're not registered, those kinds of things. So we are well within that band. But what the state board of elections did was they looked at our signatures, they pointed to a small number, and we're really unsure which ones they were pointing to. That's another aspect of this. And they said, because there are these irregularities, again, in signatures that weren't counting towards our total, because there are these irregularities, that means there could be more. And what they had done was they had pushed their certification hearing up until the very last day possible, because we had to be certified by July 1st. So they said, because there could be more, we need to further investigate. But because tomorrow's a deadline, we can't certify you because we have these questions. And now we were never ever shown what the questions were, what the evidence was that was the problem. Like they never said, they never pointed and said, these are the concerns we have. Look, this, that, and the other thing never occurred. We were never given due process where we were allowed to, defend ourselves. Okay, here's the evidence. What's your explanation? We never provided that. And then we were never given a legal justification for not being certified. So it was just the fact that they had questions. And this to people sounds very familiar, of course. This is similar to what Rudy Giuliani and all those crooks were saying after the 2020 elections, that, look, there could be fraud. And because there could be fraud, that means you can't certify you. We're not gonna show you what the evidence is. We're not going to tell you the actual details. You have to trust us. But there could be. And that's what we were held up by, this whole issue that there could be. You know, I like to say there's a lot of different things. My grandfather's German. I could be the next Kaiser of Germany. You know, I mean, like there's a lot of things that could be. Same time all this was happening, the Democratic Party comes down here from Washington, D.C., not the local Democrats, but the DSCC, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. And they immediately start calling, texting, and visiting people at their homes who had signed our petitions in an effort to harass, bully, shame them, to get them to remove their signatures, telling people that Greens help Republicans, abortion is in the balance, your signature will help a Republican win and we'll lose abortion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What they were doing besides that was they were also calling people and texting people and visiting people at their homes and saying they were with the Green Party, asking people to remove their names from the petition. They were saying they were with the State Board of Elections office or with the Secretary of State's office. So they were committing fraud. They were deliberately misleading, lying to people in a calculated manner in order to try and get people to remove their names from the petitions. And they had incredibly little success at that. 140 out of 22,500 signatures were removed. And even those are suspect because it was done under false pretenses. It was done, when people were being lied to about who was asking them to do this, as well as because, go back to the State Board of Elections. So these things are happening in parallel. And I'm sorry, this is complex and there's a lot here. This is what they do. They throw all this at you. They've got so many resources, so much money. This is what they do to try and crush like a grassroots campaign. Right. So you've got like basically two fronts happening here, two Goliaths that we're fighting. We end up filing a lawsuit in federal court. And what that does is two things occur. One, we have the good luck of having a ton of national media attention. And what the State Board of Elections is doing is that they're saying things like there's a universe of fraud here. There's blatant forgery, thousands of blatant forgeries. This is what their spokespeople are saying about us, which is, of course, something entirely different from what you expect from a government agency when an investigation is going on. Typically, a government agency is, tight-lipped. But we know that there was collusion between the governor's office, the DSCC in Washington, D.C., Sherry Beasley's campaign, who is my opponent. She's a Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. And then, of course, with the State Board of Elections, there's this relationship that exists among them where there's coordination being done to try and keep us off the ballot, keep us from being certified. What happens is there's a ton of national media attention. We have stories, a number of stories run in AP about this, NPR. We're on all kinds of podcasts and YouTube shows and print and television and radio media. And that puts a ton of pressure on the State Board of Elections, as well as the federal lawsuit, because the State Board of Elections is going into the federal lawsuit knowing that they have no evidence, knowing that they have nothing, and that they will be exposed. So what they do is they take the remainder, how much time they can. They take another month, and they come back on August 1st, and they have a hearing, and they have, okay, what are the results of our investigation? Now, this investigation they had conducted for more than 2 months, about 2.5 months. Using the full resources of the State Board of Elections. They had basically sent all the signatures back to the counties for the counties to revalidate them. And the counties did remove a few hundred signatures. And there was basically a gun put to their head saying, find everything possible you can, but again, nothing of fraud. They're saying these signatures here were turned in late. These signatures came from an old petitioning process. Again, they never show us the evidence. This is what we're told. We're never provided with the due process. But we have so many signatures above the threshold we need that them eliminating a few hundred signatures, it doesn't affect us. So what happens is that where they had gone from saying, the State Board of Elections saying that there was a universe of fraud, telling the media that there are thousands of blatant forgeries, they're now forced to, when their investigation's concluded, to say, well, there are a few sheets. There are a couple of these. There were a couple dozen signatures turned in late. I mean, that was the extent of their investigation. They took 2.5 months to show that we had done nothing wrong, that our process had integrity towards it, and that all their smears of us were fraudulent themselves. And so they certify us unanimously. They also, at that point too, because the Democratic Party, the DSCC again, Washington, D.C. folks, they have filed complaints against the various county boards of elections saying the county boards of elections didn't do their jobs properly. And the State Board of Elections then had to go and investigate those. And they unanimously, both Democrats and Republicans, dismissed those complaints by the Democratic Party because there was no evidence there either. But what happens is that we have 2.5 months where we are tied up with this, where rather than being able to campaign right away, rather than being able to put our resources into campaigning, have our people focus on campaigning, we're tied up with this, as well as having to fight the allegations that have been used to smear us. And so what happens in federal court is the judge, since the State Board of Elections certified us, the judge declares our lawsuit moot. And then because there had been that July 1st deadline, he moves that July 1st deadline so that myself and Michael Trudeau, who's running for state Senate as a Green, are put on the ballot. And that was the good news we had just this last Friday. And so we are on the ballot. There's still a lawsuit in state court that the North Carolina Democratic Party filed to block us. So that's still an open court case. However, we expect that the judge in that case will dismiss it because the federal court has jurisdiction. It's also completely frivolous. Their whole complaint is based on the bogus and baseless allegations that were thrown against us for months. That, again, twice the county boards of elections verified our signatures. The State Board of Elections had a 2.5 month long investigation. And then the U.S. District Court reviewed this all as well. And, so we expect that case in state court gets thrown out. And there is an appeal in federal court, in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, by the DSCC against district court decision in our favor. But we expect that will not go anywhere either. And so I know that's a lot, and I left a lot out, if you can believe it. But that just goes to show what we've been up against. And that's what we've had to spend our campaign focused on for the last 2.5 months. Even when I was getting very good media coverage, the media was all about, hey, Matt, when did you guys stop committing fraud? Right. So we were forced to, right. We were forced to follow a narrative, forced to have dictated to us what our campaign was about, as opposed to being out there talking about healthcare, housing, jobs, the climate, the war on drugs, the things that we want to be talking about.
Yeah, no, that's no, I appreciate the complexity and the nuances thereof. This is stuff goes analyzed very generally oftentimes in the media, so this is great. In fact, we have it just says Facebook user. I didn't realize you could post these things anonymously, but it says, wow, congratulations for being able to overcome all of those shenanigans, and most importantly, being on the ballot. So that's very cool.
Well, thank you, Facebook user. Yeah, I too. You know, if we were on, if I was on a different podcast, you know, one that wasn't specifically like Green Party focused, I probably would have left out a few details. But I think it's important for people to understand what we're up against. And I know people know this. People have experienced. People have been doing this a lot longer than I have. But the degree that the two-party system continues to evolve, continues to sharpen its knives, so to speak, right? To be able to, I mean, they would much rather fight us this way, suppress us, do everything we can to deny voters choice and option at the ballot box than actually ever contemplate doing something to earn people's votes, or, you know, reforming the system for ranked choice voting, proportional representation, getting money out of politics, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so real quick, it's the Facebook user. It says, hey, David, it's Toneel. Toneel Jackson's a Green Party member here in Illinois. She's actually running for a municipal water office in Chicago.
Good luck.
Yeah,
good luck, Toneel.
Toneel's fabulous. She's great. I love her. She does a lot of good work for the party. Yeah, okay, that is very cool. And very interesting. And something that, so on the whole third party thing and its popularity, its notoriety, the Libertarian Party and the Green Party are the two biggest third parties in the country as far as population of each goes.
Right.
I don't know which one has more than the other, but the Libertarian Party definitely got some profile in the last couple of elections due to their candidates being on CNN and so forth. Jill Stein and Ralph Nader kicked it off for us. Ralph Nader was always already kind of a big name back then because of his consumer efforts. So the notion is out there that we exist and that we're here. Though there are still people who don't know of us. I ran for a small office here like last year or the year before, I believe. And I went to the clerk's office to like sign all my stuff. And the guy looked at it and it said party affiliation. I put green. He's like, there's no such thing as the Green Party. I'm like, what? This is the clerk's office. I'm like, what? I'm like, what? So there's still some people that need to know that we actually even exist in the first place.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about the Green Party too is that it's international. The Green Party is a pretty big deal in a lot of other countries. I believe we have candidates in like 72 to 75 countries. You go to Canada, England, France, and Germany. The Green Party is a big deal. Ireland, Scotland, absolutely. Here, not as much.
Right. They it is, I think it when you talk about the benefits of the Green Party, you know, you look at the historical roots where it comes from, and it ties back into the best aspects of internationalism, the best aspects of socialism, the best aspects of progressivism. You know, those where the roots lie from. You know, we can trace the lineage, the people who inspired those who inspired us, so to speak, right? We can trace that and we can see where we come from. And it's a party that I think has a tremendous amount of potential. And certainly the moment is here for the party to grow and to have a real effect on all levels, local, state, and federal. Here in North Carolina, we have three. We're a new party. I mean, we're basically, you know, starting, you know, we're building out the foundation right now. And folks have been doing stuff here for a while, and now that we earned our spot on the ballot, went out there, had a successful petition and campaign, talked to tens of thousands of people, and we've got candidates running at local, state, and federal level. And the idea is to continue to grow on that. So this, in 2024, we end up having, if we've got 3 candidates running for us this year in North Carolina, in 2024, we'll have 7 or 8. And in 2026, we'll have 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And it's like that type of growth, right? Now, no pie in the sky nonsense. No, we're going to, all of a sudden we're going to be the biggest party in North Carolina or anything like that, but actual reasonable expectations based upon the enthusiasm for what we're offering, which we see continuously. I mean, I got to ask this when we're out there again, we've got 22,500 plus signatures, spoke to twice that many people. And get asked all the time, what would people ask you about? What would you guys talk about people out there? And, it's things that you expect, certainly inflation, housing, the war on drugs was a big message for us. But what most people spoke to us about was just simply the fact that we were out there, the need for something different, the need for another option, the need for alternatives, the need for change. And I know I feel like a lot of people feel change is a dirty word, like Barack Obama really did a number on change and hope, So, but people, that's what we were met with, that excitement for, even among people who have no interest in us. I mean, I had people who tell me, I'm a conservative, you're a socialist. There's no way I'm voting for you, but you guys need to be on the ballot. We need more choices. We need to do things differently. I just had a guy say to me the other day when I was out, like, look, I don't know much about any of this, but I know what's happening. It ain't working. And I think that's people's understanding, the right understanding, the correct observation. It's not working. You don't need to be watching and reading and following the news 24/7 every moment of the day to not realize that, to have that understanding that it's not working, that the system, the government, the parties that populate the government pick winners and losers, and that the people who have been left behind, the people that have been deliberately stepped on in order to make the rich richer, the banks bigger, the corporations stronger, they're the people that we need to represent.
Absolutely. And if you want more insight into the people that have the actual socio-political economic power in the world, read Chomsky's book, Who Rules the World.
Right.
It's unbelievably insightful and disappointing. The fact that it's happening. Okay, so Albert Shaw, who's a frequent listener here, says, "You got any campaign buttons for sale? Is there like a place they can go to kind of check out?"
Not yet. We'll have them though. Don't worry. We actually have a meeting tomorrow about that specifically. I just hour before I got on here, I saw an email relating to all those things. But that's one of the things where we're behind, right? Because look, we launched a campaign in mid-January. We spend the first 4.5, 5 months just getting out there collecting signatures on paper. That's all we do. I mean, we're trying to do other things, but like that's our focus. That's what everything comes back to, is get the signatures, right? So any money we raise, I mean, anything we're doing with that in mind. And that's fine because it's still early in the campaign. And that, of course, is a way to canvas. We get out there, we talk to people, let people know who we are. We listen to them, right? And then we turn in those signatures May 17th to the counties. And from May 17th, up until Friday, just the other day. So May 17th to August 12th, that's almost 3 months. We are in administrative, bureaucratic, and legal fights with the states. We are in the federal court. We're in state court. I mean, so all of our effort is focused on, so you have that front end of the ballot access where you spend a ton of time, a ton of money, a ton of effort, all your resources getting the signatures. And then on the back end, for a period almost as long, you spend fighting to get that rightful spot. All the work your people did, everything that everyone out there and crushed for us, you've then now got to fight. And that takes away, no matter what we say, no matter how many times my campaign manager and I, Rose Roby is my campaign manager, no matter how many times Rose and I said to each other, we're not going to let this distract us. We're going to keep focused. We're going to put, we're going to still be, it just don't have enough time in the day, particularly for a grassroots campaign, right? I mean, you folks know what that's like. You just don't have the staff of dozens to get things done. And again, I mean, so that's where your focus is. And so things like merch, things like buttons and t-shirts get pushed off. We had to redo our website. We had some other things we had to take care of. And so we're getting through all that right now. and we're launching a new website and some new branding and everything else. But, you know, the things like I'd love to be able to send Albert a button right now. And, you know, I mean, but, you know, it's coming. We'll get them. They'll be there in sometime in September. We'll have them. And, T-shirts and, you know, whatever else we end up doing, yard signs, of course, bumper stickers, I don't know, hats, mugs, I don't know, whatever we do. Yeah.
Right. And real quick, I just wanted to comment on something you just said a few minutes ago, and then we'll move on to your military experience. Is that, you know, you said that how they pick the winners and the losers and so on. In the Democratic Party in the last election, if not the election before that as well, not the last election, I'm sorry, it is the election before, the one with Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders before the primaries was beating the hell out of Hillary Clinton as far as the Democrats were concerned, the actual members of the Democratic Party. He was filling the stadiums and the auditoriums and so on and so forth far more greatly than Hillary Clinton was. But the higher ups in the Democratic Party weren't having that because they didn't want him to run for president. So they did whatever they did to, you know, rig it. I don't know if that's a proper term, but they somehow made it happen so that she won the primary. And there's all sorts of data out there about what I just said, but you can look deeper into it to see just what sort of shenanigans happened. But, you know, it's all, you know, in one way or another rigged against the people's votes. Harvard, real quick too, I'm sorry, but real quick, because this is important. Harvard did a study a few years ago about the correlation between the general public's ideas on issues and what Congress and the Senate vote for in bills. And it's like less than 30% of what the public, the majority wants to happen in the country actually happens in Congress. It's very, very low. If you do that same sort of analysis with corporations or rich folk, the percentage goes way up.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally does.
Yeah,
and
this is a Harvard study. This isn't just some whimsical, you know, agenda-ridden think tank or something like that. This is a trustworthy source. I remember reading that. I was like, oh my! I mean, you kind of always knew it, but like to actually see it in factual, logical data, it really upsets me. Okay, did you want to comment?
Right. There's also a Princeton study too that more or less said the same things. I think that Princeton study was more about how we're an oligarchy. You know, how we're not a democracy, we're an oligarchy, and same kind of thing. It's very well done, high level academic study that, you know, definitively proves that by the definitions we assign to these words, we are not a democracy. We are an oligarchy because I think similar to the study you're talking to David. Yeah. The people with the money get what they want. I mean, that's basically it.
Exactly. So Albert Shaw is saying, as a former jarhead, is that a Marine?
Yeah.
Stationed in North Carolina, I have a soft spot for military. I enjoy the thought of senators that come from different backgrounds representing the collective whole. Good luck with the race. Okay. So would you mind talking? Yeah, absolutely. Would you mind going into your military experience and what happened thereafter?
Yeah, yes. I joined the Marine Corps in 1998. I worked for a couple of years after college. So I went into the Marine Corps. I went to Officer Candidate School in January 1998. I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years, both active and reserve. Went to war in Iraq twice. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I was with the State Department. And so I went to Afghanistan with the State Department in 2009. And that's where I entered the anti-war movement from when I resigned in protest over the escalation of the war in Afghanistan in 2009. But you know, my experience in the military was, of course, it was informative and transformative. You know, I think before that, look, I'm someone who in 1992 would have been the first presidential election I could have voted for. And I didn't vote for anyone that year because nobody was left enough for me. Right. You know, between Clinton, Perot, and Bush, you know, no one was there for me. And then in 96, I voted for Bob Dole. So, right. I mean, that's how I kind of was when I was younger, right? You know, just like a lot of us are. We're all over the place. We're trying to find things. And, you know, it's actually in the Marine Corps that my political basis is really stabilizes and really that foundation is really there. You know, I don't read Noam Chomsky or Howard Zinn until I'm in the Marine Corps. Even though I went to good public schools, good private college, never read that stuff. Never read those guys there, And so, and then certainly the wars influenced me, the effect, the criminality of them, the immorality of them, the way I was able to lie to myself for so long, to go along with the wars, to make excuses for it, to come up with one rationale or another to continue to try and be moral, even though I was participating in such an immoral catastrophe, and it was something that really it haunts me and will haunt me for the rest of my life, but something that has informed the last 13 years of my life in the sense of the choices I make and the person I try to be, not allow excuses any longer. And this is one of the things that informs why I'm on the outside, right? Why did you not run as a Democrat, Matt, and, try and go through the primary system and everything else? And, sorry, one of my dogs is just being.
That's okay.
But this idea that I was on the inside, I saw what it was like. Look, when I was a young officer in the late 90s, we still had plenty of colonels and generals and sergeants major who had been in the Vietnam War. And all those guys stood in front of us and they would say things like, we're never going to let another Vietnam happen. And then, of course, a few years later, they let an Afghanistan and Iraq happen. Right. So that type of thing. And then the things you lie to yourself about how that you are going to take part in the war and you are going to be a moral actor when, again, you cannot be in you're just going to be an agent of the immorality of the war itself, no matter what you think you're going to be able to accomplish because you're participating in it. The same thing as well with the idea that I am going to, I'm a junior guy now or I'm a mid-level guy, but in the future, when I'm a senior level person, then I won't let something like this happen. So you constantly lying to yourself, making excuses. And then finally, for me, what happens is when I'm join the State Department and go to Afghanistan 2009, and I'm morally and intellectually broken at this point. Like I'm just a chunk of meat and trying to decide what to do instead of either, trying to find something to justify not putting a gun in my mouth, and that's how I lived for a long time. And I get to Afghanistan in 2009 as a foreign service officer, as a political officer, with the understanding that we were going to end the war. That was my understanding. Comes very clear that the White House is not interested in ending the war, and they almost immediately escalate the war. And so after getting to Afghanistan, seeing that the war in Afghanistan was fundamentally no different than the war in Iraq, seeing that the Obama administration was fundamentally no different than the Bush administration, seeing the escalation of the war, knowing where that would go. I resigned in protest and became a kind of Forrest Gump myself into the anti-war community and the human rights community. And that's what I've been doing for most of the last 13 years. But even there too, when I first come out of the State Department, I have this idea that somehow I'll go back in. There are these diplomats who did very similar to what I did, guys like Tony Lake and others who resigned from the State Department and the government over the Vietnam War, and then later on went back into the government. And I had a thought, well, maybe I could do something like that, maybe. And so the first couple of years that I'm out and I'm doing the anti-war stuff, I'm hedging. I'm not being as full-hearted. Now my soul is not as much into it as it should be. I'm not speaking as forthrightly. I'm holding back on some things. I don't describe war as organized murder because I might offend somebody. Now, it's the only description that fits war is organized murder. That's so you do that, and then it's even too when I'm at a think tank, and even when I'm saying things like that in DC, it's the idea of trying to work on the inside. And so I've spent so much time in Congress. I've worked with so many members of Congress, both House and Senate side, their staffs. I've done a lot of the work inside. I was on a political action committee for 5 years, a member of the board of directors, where I worked. The Political Action Committee, Council for a Livable World is what it's called. Its purpose is to reduce nuclear weapons. So, trying to give money to Democratic candidates to get them to reduce nuclear weapons. And what do you see? You end up seeing, no, you don't get that. We get a $2 trillion expansion of nuclear weapons underneath Barack Obama. So I've put a lot of time into trying to do things from the inside and just being, let me just say that was a terrible mistake. So I think where I've come to this understanding that you have to change from the outside. That, one of the quotes I go to all the time is Martin Luther King's quote. First time I know he speaks of it is in the Beyond Vietnam sermon he gives at the Riverside Church in April of 1967, 1 year before he's killed, when he comes out so forcefully against the war. And what Dr. King says is that, true compassion is not flipping a coin to a beggar. It's tearing down the edifice that creates beggars. Nice. You can't tear down that edifice from the outside. You're not going to defeat this thing from from being on the inside. You have to be on the outside. And it took me a long time to fully appreciate that and understand it. Probably too long, but here I am.
So you think you can do much more within Washington than without?
I think as an outsider, as a true independent in the U.S. Senate, as someone who's representative of a constituency of working families who follows principles and values, you can make that place stop. You can be an obstructionist in a way that is for the working class and the middle class, because at this point, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, or more than 60% are living paycheck to paycheck. So like that, as if there's some defining line between classes, and everyone is getting squeezed. And where the working class got squeezed and squeezed and squeezed for decades and decades and decades, now the middle class, because the working class is out. I mean, it's like a ketchup bottle or toothpaste. Right? I mean, like the bottom's empty. You got to squeeze higher up, right? I mean, get that money, got to keep going to the top. So, if I'm in the Senate, because the Senate particularly is an institution that, because of the peculiarities of it, the uniqueness of it, the arcaneness of some of its rules, one person, as we have seen, say with Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema, can make an amazing difference. Unfortunately, Manchin and Sinema are doing it for their wealthy friends and for the oil and gas industry. But imagine if we had somebody in there who was willing to just bring it all down, stop it all, right? Unless working people got what they need, unless working people were elevated to the winner status that they've been pushed away from for so long. And so I like to say, no one is getting their $15 billion aircraft carriers unless our people get health care. And that's my pledge if I'm in the U.S. Senate.
Well, that's perfect. That's spot on. Ethan Winnett said, "You're the real deal. Good luck, Matt."
Well, thank you, Ethan.
Absolutely. These are people that are, when Don Rod said, "Saul good." I don't know what that means.
Thanks, Don.
Right. Very interesting. I've known people in the military in a multitude of different branches, and not one of them that I can think of off the top of my head had nothing but positive things to say about their experience in the military and what the government does in battle time, in battle-like situations, deployment. And it's I just also want to say, since this is a Green Party show, and green means that we emphasize the environment. And we'll get to that in a second, because you mentioned Joe Manchin, and he's no good. The United States, of all like individual entities or collectives that can be, that contribute pollution to the planet, the United States military is literally number one.
Right. I think there's only, I can't remember off the top of my head, but like there's something like only 40 countries pollute more than the U.S. military does.
As a country.
As a country, right? Yeah. I mean,
right.
It's just,
you can massive. Take, right, exactly. No, I mean, they're still doing nuclear testing and blowing up, under the ocean ecosystems and so on. And think about all the diesel fuel used and the rocket launchers.
It's something like the normal car in the U.S. You have to drive that thing 8 years to emit as much emissions as an F-35. Now, maybe not, an F-16 does in like 1 hour. It's just the scale is just, yeah.
You heard that? The scale. That's insane.
It is. The scale is just, I mean, it's just the amount that the U.S. military emits, just as a matter of course, a matter of business, is absolutely tremendous. And to be fair to the U.S. military, not that any of this is a concern for them, but they do actually care about fuel consumption and other things because of operational reasons, right? They want their ships to be able to travel farther, the planes to fly farther. So not because they care about the planet, but they're actually trying to be as fuel conscious or as energy use as little energy as possible, because that makes better sense for them. I actually knew a guy who was head of installations and logistics for the Department of Defense a number of years ago, and they were trying to make all their buildings more, energy responsible, I guess, right? Because it just makes dollars and cents sense for them, not because these guys care about the planet. But again, and so you can imagine but even with all that said, the amount that they consume and emit is just you can't really even comprehend it.
That's unfathomable ratio that you just described. That's I'm gonna have to do a little more detailed research. That's insane in an hour.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. You have to drive your car for 8 years to meet what the F-16 does in an hour. Maybe it's the F-15. The F-35, I think, actually has better fuel consumption, but like not by that much. Maybe you drive your car for 6 years rather than 8 years for 1 hour of flight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you remember that old bumper sticker back in the day where it said it'll be a great day when schools get all the money they want. The military has to hold a bake sale to buy a new plane.
Right. That's exactly right.
Because there's a really good, genuine point there, is that we have a completely over bloated military that does disgusting, horrible, awful things. Don't give me, like that song from Van Halen, Right Now. Right now your government is doing things you think only other governments are doing. Don't give me this crap that our government is great, wonderful, and blessed by God and is perfectly morally righteous, because that's 100% nonsense.
Well, and then there's the other aspect of it too, the intersectionality of all this, where how this all ties together. The U.S. military, because everything we just said, well, that makes U.S. military ExxonMobil's biggest customer in the world.
Woo-hoo.
Right. Like that, but they consume so much. They are the biggest fossil fuel customer in the world.
Yeah.
Where that ties into, right. And then you understand that there are, I think it's 10 financial corporations in the world, the King of Saudi Arabia's bank, State Street, Vanguard, a number of these things that control over half the fossil fuel companies. I mean, so the way this all ties together, right? Where in the sense that the U.S. military is the biggest consumer of fossil fuels. You got the fossil fuel companies, and then you have the banks themselves that own those fossil fuel companies, and it's just one big loop, right? It's just one big relationship. The connections are all there, and then when you understand that, you can understand the interplay between foreign policy, energy policy, domestic policy, financial and monetary policy, et cetera, because it's the same small group that is benefiting from those decisions, which when you go back to what you're saying a while back, David, about the study that shows that the corporations that's because they are able to focus on these things. They are able to purchase what they need in terms of votes in the U.S. Congress, and they've got a very small constituency that is able to make sure that its needs are being met. Right. I mean, so it is when they have those shared relationships. That's the reason why Bank of America is not going to ever oppose U.S. wars overseas, right? I mean, there's a connection there, a relationship there that people, I think it's helpful to understand how the money cycles through those established relationships.
Right, exactly, and we can speak days about that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to George. It goes back to George Carlin. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Right. Very wise man. I miss him. Yeah. Okay, we got about 15 minutes left. This stuff flies by when it's interesting.
It does.
We are the Green Party, and it initiated as a lot in reaction to nuclear energy and that sort of thing. We are, as a political party, we hold a multitude of different positions and stances on different issues, sociopolitically and economically, for sure. But the environment, climate change, these are very high on our list of emphasis of issues. You mentioned Joe Manchin. I don't know is he North or South Carolina? I don't remember.
Manchin's West Virginia.
Oh, West Virginia. Oh, neither. All right, good. But he's a loon. And I don't know what his problem is, but he's a good example of showing like what you just said, how you can kind of like put a wedge in the gears of the mechanizations of Washington and just being one person. Like he holds up a lot of stuff by disagreeing with his constituents and his partners in crime in the Democratic Party. But let's talk about the environment. What's going on in North Carolina specifically, and just your kind of position on what's going on generally.
Well, yeah, we have, one thing that happened here in North Carolina didn't get nearly the amount of attention it needed to, is that the largest gasoline spill in U.S. history occurred here with the Colonial Pipeline. And people might remember the Colonial Pipeline from a year or so ago when it was hacked and it was shut down for a few days. And then there was right, and then there was a lot of price gouging and a panic buying and things like that. But Colonial Pipeline has spilled more than 2.5 million gallons of gasoline. Went on for quite a while. It's only in the last couple of weeks that it's been exposed how big a spill it was. Colonial kept trying to downplay it, and I think both federal and state regulators weren't too keen on pushing them. And there are some great journalists who really fought and went after it. And so we have here in North Carolina the same concerns that people have other places in terms of the pollution. I mean, we've had a history of coal ash that was used to fill in land and other things that, of course, toxifies the land and the groundwater, causing all kinds of problems, including cancer. We have hog farms here that are killing our ground, killing our groundwater, killing our rivers. I think we're the number 2 state after Iowa, I think, for hogs, and then we have the sea level rise. We have the floods. We've had towns that have been washed away, not nearly as bad as, say, what happened in, Kentucky and Missouri, right? I mean, recently, but last year, we had a couple of floods that, by the grace of God, nobody was killed. We're not going to get lucky like that anymore. So we're experiencing both the ruinous consequences of the everyday efforts of industrialization, of corporatism, of big business to make a buck and screw everything else. We're experiencing that like everyone else is, but then we're also feeling the climate. And just today, it's in Axios, which is not my favorite publication, but today they had a really great story about how, including your area, from Texas up to Illinois, and in the Southeast and, of course, the Southwest, by 2053, so 30 years from now, will be a severe heat zone. That will be a band of heat that stretches. And, here in North Carolina, in the parts of the Southeast, that's expected to arrive by 2030. We're going to have this severe heat that will, that will fundamentally change how we live, and that's just the heat. Right. That's not the drought. That's not the wildfires. That's not the floods. That's not the hurricanes. That's not sea level rise. All these other things that are affecting us, all, of course, all tied together. But so certainly the climate is an issue that is affecting us as it is everywhere else, as well as, again, just the day-to-day run-of-the-mill barbarism against the environment, committed to make a buck in this country that, continues to get worse. And, you talk about Manchin, and of course, Manchin was involved with Chuck Schumer on this Inflation Reduction Act being heralded. Chuck Schumer keeps screaming about how it's the greatest climate legislation history of mankind. Well, certainly for the U.S., it's really the first climate legislation we had. So if it's the greatest, it's because it's the first. But whatever benefits are provided in it, and just so people are clear on the benefits, the amount of money being spent is equal to what we spend, is equal to 4% of what we spend on the Pentagon. So it's really nothing. We're doing almost the bare minimum. And anything that's in that, particularly the wind and solar projects, are all dependent upon the oil and gas companies giving one on land a doubling of acreage. So every year, the U.S. government auctions off about 1 million acres to oil and gas companies of public lands. And this new legislation will double that to require the U.S. government to auction off 2 million acres every year for 10 years. And in offshore, it's 60 million acres of water are to be auctioned off every year for the next 10 years. So you're talking about 620 million land and water acres that will be given to the oil and gas company. This is an exponential growth in what they're able to develop. And just so people understand what 620 million acres are, Texas, the state of Texas, is 170 million acres. So that's how much land is being given to the oil and gas company. Land and water is being given to the oil and gas company. That is going to have an effect that is, as they describe, carbon bombs, right? Where this will have such a negative effect on our climate that anything else that's included in this Manchin-Schumer climate legislation is meaningless. You know, there's other things too as well. There's the oil and gas companies are getting further subsidies. They already get tens of billions of dollars worth of subsidies every year, even though they pull in record profits every year. But then the other aspect is that this is very concerning, is that a lot of the regulations that are in place for new energy construction, for pipelines, so to speak, those regulations are being cut, they're being slashed, and that's going to have an astonishing consequence on our nation over the next 10, 20 years as these new projects come online that don't have the same standards that they once had for environmental protection. So this is really, and this is what the Center for Biological Diversity says about it, they describe it as a suicide pact, and it really is. This type of, even though it's being heralded and triumphed as it's going to save us, no, this is only digging the knife deeper into our chests.
Yeah, no, well said. That's a good analogy, because it is a sense of extreme urgency right now. I remember doing research. I think it was I've been to this show a little over a year now, so I think it was a show. It might have been a show before that, but anyway, I remember looking at at the time the most current IPCC report about things and discovered the 45% global reduction of carbon emissions by the year 2030. That was the first deadline. I'm like, that's like 8 years from now.
Right.
You know, I'm like, that's in my lifetime. I mean, this isn't something that like it's way off in the distance. It's at the end of the century or anything like that. And if you don't hit that deadline, the 2050 net zero doesn't mean anything.
That's right. That's right.
And so I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I'm like, I don't think people actually realize that this is happening. Like, we got 8 years, folks.
Right.
You know, and I don't think people realize a lot of this stuff, it lacks urgency in the individual because it doesn't, they might be like, you know, yeah, that's messed up. I agree 100%, but it's not in their face. You know, it's not going to affect, you know, it might affect their great grandchildren, but who cares? You know, that kind of thing. So this is the real deal. And it's very disconcerting.
Right. And you know what the UN is saying is that we have to begin reduction in fossil fuel use immediately. You know, I think their number I heard the other day was within 36 weeks, we have to begin that.
Yeah.
You know, so within half a year, we have to begin. And here we are expanding fossil fuel use. Right. I mean, it's madness. I mean, this will be, whatever comes after us on this planet, will find a record of this, or space aliens will come down and visit us after we're gone or whatever. And they will see that we authored our own doom, that we created our own demise, that our greed. And I go back to Cornel West all the time because Cornel West says it so well. We are living at the intersection of might makes right and greed is good. And we are killing ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's and look, I've interviewed a lot of different types of people on this show and my other shows, and I'll just say this: there are a lot of people out there who are being a lot less patient about it, and I think amongst all the things that you mentioned or it gets mentioned as far as like problems, with agriculture, food supply chains being disrupted, and lack of water resources for people and stuff like that. People are not going to just sit there and take it. Let governments and corporations destroy the planet because they're governments and corporations. Okay. There are a lot of people out there that are getting very, very scared very, very quickly. And I'm just saying that they're not going to do it. Their goal is to not fix it through political means. I'll just say that.
Well, people will have to, it'll be a matter of survival. People will have to do what's necessary. Look, we have climate refugees here in North Carolina. I meet people from California who said, I was sick of the wildfires. I couldn't handle it any longer. Wow. We came here. I mean, and that's a minor thing right now in terms of numbers. But like the migration, like again, the thing in Axios today, which I encourage people to go look at, 100 million Americans, it's something like 6 or 7 million Americans live in a severe heat zone now, I guess primarily the Southwest, right? Where it gets severe heat is defined as 125 plus degrees. And, you're talking about now large parts of the Southeast and that band from Texas up to you guys in Illinois being a severe heat zone. And so it was like 107 million, 108 million people live in those areas. That's 1 in 3 Americans, a little less than 1 in 3 Americans. Where are those people going to go? What are they going to do? You talked just before, David, about supply chain distribution, food production distribution. I mean, all kinds of stuff. One of the things I think about is that we're going to lose 2050, 2060. We're going to lose a couple dozen towns on our coast here in North Carolina from sea level rise. Where are those people going to go? Where are they going to go? What jobs are they going to get? I mean, like those types of things are something that we have to think about, because there is the aspect of mitigating climate change, which the room is getting much smaller in terms of the people who are saying we can mitigate it. And there's the assimilation with climate change, which very few people talk about. The Green Party, one of the best, of course, with our Green New Deal, right? How are we going to assimilate? How are we going to adapt? How are we going to cope with this climate collapse? And one of the things we need to have is we need to revisit and reimagine and rebuild our societal and economic infrastructure to deal with what our society is going to be like, our world's going to be like in 2050, 2060, because it's not going to look like this at all. It's going to be very, very dangerous. And this is where you get into the ideas that this is existential. It's not like we're going to die because rain's going to turn to fire and we're going to, melt or anything like that. It's existential because the systems, the structures we have now will collapse because of the climate is collapsing.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. I mean, we might be switching soon from like how to solve the climate change problem to how to survive it.
Right.
Because
I mean, I could tell you in my house here. Yeah. Sorry. I mean, I can tell you in my house, when we have very hot days here in North Carolina, like my house is not built for that. I live in North Carolina in the South, and when we have days when it's 100 plus with the heat index, like you can feel it in my house. And so, you increase that risk, what that's going to do to people's health. We see it all the time with heat waves, where particularly our older community doesn't survive. What are we going to do about that? And that's just one aspect of literally thousands of aspects of this that we have to contend with.
No, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it just keeps getting. I mean, speaking of the IPCC and its reports, they keep putting out like little sub reports, like, oh, by the way, we were wrong about this stat over here. It's actually much worse. Right. They never say like, oh, we were wrong. It's actually not that bad.
Right. That's exactly right. In their language, these are all scientists, and their language now is very dramatic, and so for these scientists to be using such language as they're using, they're trying to be as clear as possible. The other things about these reports is that they're consensus reports. So they have to reach a consensus among dozens, if not hundreds, of collaborators. So very often you get a conservative report, and these reports now are anything but conservative. And what they've been saying is like what you just said, David. Oh, yeah, no, we've been wrong in our previous reports. It's much worse than we thought. None of them are being like, oh, we got it wrong. It's not that bad. Everyone's like, no, we got it wrong. It's much worse than we thought it was going to be.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a very cautious panel, and it's a very strict and rationally rigid panel. It's not a panel that should be trifled with. And the debate is over. I'm tired of people who I remember as a bartender, this guy sitting there, some MAGA weirdo complaining about oh, it's all a hoax. It's just a VAT tax and blah, 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 blah. And I remember I'm like, did you go to college? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what degree did you get? He's like, finance. I'm like, so you really think that you solve the climate change issue? The tens of millions of scientists, PhDs in the world have been doing this for 70, 80 years, studying the environment and the climate and everything else, and you solved it, proved them all wrong by Googling a couple of things. I mean, it's nonsense that you think you know better than these people do. They're gathering data from all over the world and analyzing it in a way that you're supposed to analyze data. They know how to do it.
Well, I mean, I think, and you see among professionals, whether they be hunters, whether they be, one of the things I used to point to, was the Coast Guard about 20 years ago saying we need more ships. We need more. We need different ships. We need that because the ice is breaking. The ice isn't going to be there, and we're going to have to be up. I mean, so when professionals start doing that kind of stuff, and you can see it with like what the banks have been saying. I think maybe the best example then is the fossil fuel companies that lied about this for decades. Fossil fuel companies knew about this for going back to the 70s, and they lied about it, just like the tobacco companies lie and everything else. These guys lied as well. And I mean, so when you look at what the professionals are saying, who are not tied, who are not science, climatologists or anything like that, but professionals. And again, this could be people like fishermen, hunters, who will tell you that it's different. I mean, my cousin lives in New York where I grew up, and every year up there in the 80s, you could reliably skate on the ponds and the lakes. Like it just was something that was always going to be available. Like maybe not for the whole winter, but there'd be a period where you could get out on the ice. And nope, not anymore. Not even close. Not even close. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really sad. We are at the end of the hour. See, that's crazy, man. I got like 8,000 more questions for you. So we're just going to have you back on maybe a little bit closer to the election date. That'd be great.
Happy to. Yeah, happy to. Thanks, David. I appreciate this.
Do you want to mention anything that maybe some contact info or something like that? Or
Sure. Yeah. Website is MatthewHofersenate.org. Last name spelled HOH. If you could go give us a few weeks, we'll have those buttons there for you, Albert. But in the meantime, if people want to help with donations, we can certainly take the help. Again, we're coming out of this big legal battle. We're still in court. We just think that we're going to win, but we still have all that plus the campaigning. And so if you like what I'm talking about, if you like what the campaign stands for, if you want to help the North Carolina Green Party, please consider donating. Please encourage others to donate, because that's simply the best way you can help us right now is donating. If you want to volunteer, feel free to sign up, because we can use help from out of state. I know a lot of folks here at Illinois Green Party. So if I know you got your own campaigns and everything else, but if you want to help, we can use help with people out of state, right? Doing phone banking, text banking, web banking, whatever. So if people want to join us, please feel free to do so. And good luck to everybody with the Illinois Green Party. Tonio, good luck to you with your campaign. And David, thank you so much for this conversation. Yeah, I hope to do it again with you sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much as well. Matthew Hoh, North Carolina Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate. Thank you for being here. I am grateful for you. You are I like whoever said that, you are the real deal. Ethan said that. This is great. You know what you're talking about. You've done your research. You've done your homework. You're not just throwing out empty statements of virtue. Not that virtue isn't important. Of course it is. It's essential. But I mean, it's just like, we're going to do what's right. And that's all they say, So what does that look like? So thank you very much for you. Everybody, thank you for tuning into the Illinois Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rich. Till next time, be good, be green. Take care.